Hello, everybody. It's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology, and I am bringing you the chart of the spring equinox, which occurs March 19th at 9:50 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The spring equinox is when the sun moves into the sign of Aries. And you can see here on the chart that you see the sun at 0 degrees of Aries on the 19th at 9:50 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So what this means in the northern hemisphere of the world is that the days will start to get longer because the sun is in relationship to the earth uh, as it's now beginning to rotate around the earth from our perspective further and further into the northern hemisphere, bringing more light. So symbolically, what this correlates to is the light of our spirit being turned on, being brought back, being beginning to shine even stronger since the winter solstice. So that's what the sun is indicative of. It's about our individuality. It's about our will. It is about our higher self because it's the light. It's what everything spins around in our solar system. So symbolically, it's the light of ourselves that radiates, the warmth of ourselves that radiates out into the world. And at the equinox time, this solar energy is in Aries. Aries is about the energy of springtime in the northern hemisphere. If you think of like the bursting forth of the tulips, let's say, coming up from the dirt, that's Aries energy. It's consciousness activating and taking action. It's got an element of courage to it. It has an element of directed energy, of force. It can be also connected with willpower, but more so in this sort of energy of taking action. And that's what the equinox is all about. It's about the revival or the renewal of this kind of spirit within all of us, this pioneering spirit. And I want to read a few keywords from this old text by Paul Grell. And here's what he says about Aries. Self-assertion, initiative, leader, will, freedom, action, intense, resourcefulness, forceful, expressive, demonstrative, energetic, aggressive, impulsive, mental, and offensive power. And in its positive expression, it's confidence, pioneering, inspiring, fearless, courageous, constructive, accomplisher, initiative, intuitive, penetrating, proud, spontaneous, ambitious, good competitor, enthusiastic, quick-witted, and audacious. So these are all positive ways that we can all begin to experience the sun moving into the sign of Aries at this time. It's really asking us to begin to step into those expressions of the solar nature and shine our light in these ways out into the world at this time. So there's a few things going on in addition to the sun moving into the sign of Aries on the day of the equinox. And one of these is the fact that that day the moon will be in the sign of Aquarius. Now, the moon is our emotional response to the world. It has to do with our feeling nature, our subconscious, intuitive, instinctive nature. And in the sign of Aquarius, Well, Aquarius is all about being forward thinking. It's about inventiveness. It's about um, really also a very kind of higher mind, intuitive connection, insight that can come to us. So, in some ways, this moon in Aquarius is a very intuitive energy that's happening. But it's about how we can respond instinctually in a way that progresses and in a way that evolves, because Aquarius rules the sign because Aquarius is the sign of humanity. So there's something about how we will instinctively and intuitively respond at this time that is thinking of the larger group, is thinking of our individuality, but at the same time of how we individually impact the entire group. So that moon is going to be squaring Venus all day on the equinox. And Venus is in the sign of Taurus. Venus is comfortable in the sign of Taurus because Venus rules the sign of Taurus. Venus is about our, it's about beauty, what we find beautiful. It's about having our pleasures met. Venus is also a very creative energy because it rules the energy of beauty. So we can tap into the energy of beauty and tap into it through our creative expression. And Taurus is about what we value. It's about security. It's about determination. It's also about getting our pleasures met, but it's very practical in its approach. It can be, in some ways, kind of possessive. It can hold on or maybe be stubborn about really being determined to get what it wants. But there's something about Taurus energy here that in the sign of Venus, it does tend to express itself more in a positive way. And some of the key words for Taurus are persistence, dependable, thrifty, industrious, generous, affectionate, creative, devoted, specialist, patience, reserved, retentive, stability, sympathetic, and security. So we will be wanting to get our desires met, wanting to pursue the expression of beauty in these Taurian type of ways at this time. But with the moon squaring Venus, what this is suggesting at this time that we may need to be more open-minded and a little more humanitarianly oriented through our instincts in order to overcome some of these more possessive ways that Venus and Taurus may express itself. It makes me think a little bit of what's happening right now with the way that people are going out and buying a lot of things and stocking up on a lot of things because there's really kind of fear there that there may not be enough. And Taurus is very practical, so it's thinking about, okay, practically, what are the things that I should be consuming at this time. But the moon in Aquarius is there trying to loosen up Taurus's attachment a bit and say, hey, we also need to be thinking of the group. We need to be thinking of the whole. That's all Aquarius energy. And so we may be able to kind of shift that energy a little bit at this time to kind of loosen up a little bit around that real sort of survival instinct that some of us may be feeling. And it also may just be helping us too to kind of really loosen up or or let go of some of the attachment we may have to things at this time. You know, I think this unprecedented situation that we're all living through with the coronavirus is bringing up some Venus and Taurus issues about how we may be really attached to the things in our life. And because, you know, Uranus recently conjuncted this Venus and helped Venus maybe see a little bit more how we need to really wake up from some of our physical attachments in life. You know, we're so used to having everything we need to excess. And this Venus and Taurus has really gotten a little bit of a wake-up call about that as it conjuncted Uranus. And now with the moon in the sign of Uranus, with the moon in the sign of Aquarius, which Uranus rules, this is just another knock on the door asking us to become more open-minded about you know, the things in our lives, the things that we think we need, versus what is really what is really good for the whole, what is really good for the group, what is really good for humanity. The other thing that's going to be happening around this time of the sun moving into the sign of Aries are a couple of things. There's going to be a conjunction with Mars and Jupiter, and this is happening really the next day, which is on the 20th of March, early in the morning around 5:35 Mountain Standard Time. But you're going to see that we're going to have Mars and Jupiter come together in what's called a conjunction in the sign of Capricorn. So conjunctions are always times of initiating. They're similar to Aries energy. It's when the two energies are able to, well, they come together and they're both operating. So how are they operating is the question, based on whether or not they kind of get along or not. So first, let's talk about Mars. Mars is what rules the sign of Aries. So this energy of Mars becomes significant as the sun moves into the sign of Aries, because it's suggesting how this shining our light in these Aries ways of courage and initiative and taking action. But this Mars in Capricorn is suggesting more specifically how we can be expressing this Aries nature through our solar light. And Mars is, again, this energy of action and assertiveness. And in the sign of Capricorn, Mars is what's considered exalted. So that means it's working very well in the sign of Capricorn. So how does Mars work in Capricorn? Well, Capricorn is about patience and persistence and going the extra mile and hanging in there. It's about really putting consistent effort. It can also be about things such as accountability, self-discipline, hard work, organization, caution, ambition, seriousness, goal orientation, and personal honor. So it's suggesting that really this Aries energy of, this Mars energy of going after things and, you know, putting this strong male ego energy force into things has some temperance in the sign of Capricorn. And it has patience. And it has personal honor. I think that's a very important point at this time, where we're really being challenged through the ways that we might be seeing others behave and the ways that we might be being asked to behave in certain situations when there's really a lot of fear and panic, or there can be. This is sort of saying, like, keep your cool. Let's be reasonable. Let's be more intentional with the way that we take action. Let's have personal honor. I think that's just such a great, wonderful definition for Capricorn, where we can really take action in these ways that are going to make things really better for everybody. If we can temper that Mars aggressive energy, but also be responsible, be reasonable. This isn't saying don't be smart. This is saying take action in ways that are, again, tempered. Now, some of the more challenging expressions of Capricorn can be dominance, austerity, restrictiveness, inhibition, and control. So that is suggesting that the way that we assert with Mars and Capricorn can also be in those ways, and that we need to really remain aware at this time of observing when we might be heading in those directions, and become more aware and perhaps choose differently. Now, the Jupiter conjuncting, well, it's really Mars conjuncting the Jupiter, because Mars moves faster, so it's going to be moving over the Jupiter. But Jupiter is also in the sign of Capricorn, and Jupiter is the energy of wisdom. Jupiter it rules the sign of Sagittarius, and it's about really wanting to expand our perspective. So Jupiter rules things like religions, and it rules things like philosophy and higher education, things that bring more context into our reality, and ways that help us find faith, find hope, find ways of framing things so that we don't get too kind of like overwhelmed by like chaos. Jupiter helps us to put things into a context, a larger context that brings us optimism and brings us resilience. Jupiter rules humor and joviality. Some key words for Jupiter are expanding my consciousness, expressing joy and enthusiasm, and developing philosophy. So you can see how Mars asserting an action and Jupiter expansion, philosophy, can be a very really beautiful combination, where we can kind of feel maybe revitalized and enthusiastic about attacking things or taking on challenge with some sort of optimism and some sort of hope and some sort of framework or structure with which to see things in a larger, expanded perspective type of way. Jupiter also deals with our ethics and our morals, and I think that is where this whole combination of Mars and Jupiter in the sign of Capricorn can really come into play in a positive way at this time. But first, I want to talk about the sign of Jupiter in its fall, which is what it's considered to be in the sign of Capricorn. And what this means is that we might be seeing with Jupiter in Capricorn where perhaps there's been more of that miserly form of the Capricorn energy expressing itself. So as we're trying to expand and have more philosophical perspective, the Capricorn energy just might not be able to see that very well. It has a more kind of closed-minded perspective out of really kind of almost like a fear-based, like survival instinct in a sense. Capricorn's about doing what needs to get done in order to create stability and foundation. So if Jupiter's saying, hey, look at it this way, look at it this way, Capricorn might take a little more time to really get on board with things. And in some ways, this is a good thing because Jupiter could be so expansive and broad in its perspective that Capricorn has a more grounding, like, okay, let's look at this practically and let's look at this more realistically. So I can see why it is said that Jupiter's in its fall in Capricorn, where it's just because they're almost like two opposing forces. One is about expansion and contraction, and one is more about limitation and contraction. I don't know if I just said contraction for Jupiter, but I meant expansion and just growth, whereas Capricorn is more about containment. But going back to Jupiter being connected to ethics and morals, because that's really what it's about. It's not just like, it's not expansion at any expense. It's more thought out, and it's more about, it's considered expansion. And so the fact that Jupiter is connected to ethics and morals, and Mars is going to be conjuncting it and stimulating it, and saying that there's some action to be taken in that regard. Again, the Capricorn energy will sort of ground this energy of Mars and Jupiter conjunction. And, perhaps this could be speaking to just some of the shifts and changes that are really happening collectively with all of this energy in Capricorn right now. We see it with Saturn and Pluto and Mars and Jupiter, but this Mars and Jupiter is sort of in Capricorn, sort of talking about like containing expansion right now and taking action to contain expansion in all ways. And, we're really being asked, all of us, to do that. I mean, we're literally being told to like stay home. So we can't go out in the same ways that we normally do. And in the ways that we normally sort of create security and create foundation in our lives. It's all kind of shifting right now, downshifting in a way. And we're really kind of slowing down and being asked, I suppose, to reflect a bit on how we assert in these ways that create growth and expansion in our lives, but in a very practical manner, in a very ethical manner, in a very, again, keywords for Capricorn, accountable manner, in a self-disciplined manner. I've been talking with people and even experiencing it myself. It's sort of like having to reorganize in a sense, because we've got more time on our hands right now, some of us, if we are doing more self isolation, and we're being shown or being asked to kind of like just tune in a little bit more and become more accountable in the ways that we do expand and grow in the world. Becoming more grounded in the ways that we expand and grow, and becoming just more responsible in how we assert ourselves in these ways of growth and expansion that are just having to be altered at this time. Okay, and the last thing I want to point out about the sun entering the sign of Aries at this spring equinox is that we're going to have the North Node in Cancer sextiling Uranus in Taurus. And this will be happening really on the day of the equinox. Let me get back here to that day. And this will be happening more so around the day of the equinox, but of course it will last the 23rd of March, which is the following Monday. but we've got this North Node in Cancer sextiling Uranus and Taurus. So the North Node is descriptive of where we are collectively headed, as far as, like, in a sense, like a collective destiny. And it speaks to what we're learning, what we're collectively learning about. I mean, we're learning collectively from many parts of the chart, but this is sort of like, because the North Node relates to the moon in the chart, this is about how we are responding collectively. And so the North Node is talking about, as souls, where we are collectively headed. And it describes where we've come from like past life energy, and it describes where we're going. So what this is saying is that collectively we are all heading towards becoming more Cancerian, becoming more nurturing, becoming more mothering, becoming more about all of that feminine energy of being receptive, of being caring. You know, this is all Cancer energy. Some more Cancer keywords are sensitive, domestic, playful, spontaneity, nurturance, personal warmth. So that's a really beautiful energy that we are all collectively headed into, or in, being asked to embody. And what it's doing is it's sextiling this Uranus and Taurus, which I was talking about earlier. Uranus, which is the great awakener, it's shaking us up, it's shocking change in relation to our material values. So Uranus is just bringing to the fore, you know, showing us how materialistic as a society we have become, and how we need to really, for the evolution of humanity, because of the way it's destroying the earth and really creating such division between people, that, you know, we are having to reevaluate and restructure our relationship to the material world, to what we value. So this is suggesting that the North Node in Cancer, if we can move more into warmth and compassion and understanding and mothering and, you know, nurturing, if we can really move in that direction, these two are working together at this time, as we begin to recognize and realize more and more what is changing and what has to change in relationship to our values, what we value, and the things that we value, relationships, the material world. What brings us security? It's changing. It has to evolve. That's what Uranus is all about. It has to, from a higher perspective, from a higher energy, we are being woken up to the fact that we have to really shake loose of some of the value that we've put on the material world, that is just destroying the material world that we live in. And so this is suggesting that bringing in a more compassionate nature, not only, you know, first starting with ourselves by recognizing, okay, maybe I've participated in some of this, and maybe I need to become more aware of how I have, and make some changes in the way that I relate to the material world in my own life. If we can become more nurturing towards ourselves in that regard, and then also towards others, that we can move more in the direction that we need to at this time, which is bringing a loving and compassionate and nurturing, mothering nature to how we're looking at everything, really. You know, it's crazy, but we have to mother ourselves, and we have to mother the world at this time, in order to help usher in these changes that are happening, and that we are needing to globally become more aware of, and, you know, work towards fixing, basically, at this time. And, I know that sounds like a huge chunk to bite off, but what this is just saying is that we may be able at this time to have a more compassionate perspective towards ourselves and towards others, uh, in order to help usher in this energy of change that is right at our doorstep at this time. We're not able to um, access all of the resources that we've had just at our fingertips for so long. And we are really reaching a tipping point where we're having to really ask ourselves how we are contributing, and how we can also work towards making this collective change that has to be made in regards to the things that we value and how those impact the world around us. So I'm wishing you all a really beautiful, beautiful spring equinox. I hope that you take some time to recognize the sun moving into the sign of Aries, and symbolically what it means for all of us, that we can feel revitalized, that we can feel courage, that we can feel strength to take new action at this time, and do it in a way that is really helpful for everyone. Aries is about the self, and it is about really expressing the self. But I think there's no doubt that there are other parts of this chart that are saying we really do need to learn about self-control, and also learn about how we collectively need to unite in order to make the changes that are necessary for our world, our earth at this time. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my channel, please subscribe, and I will be back with another video with you soon. Take care.